This is Drew Spence from the Dynamic Universe and Digital Art Live. We're finishing up the Advanced Comic Creation course, which was an 8-week study on comic book creation. Using a narrative perspective, what we did was we created exercises for the participants that involved taking a huge array of images and formulating a story from scratch. Not only was it the difficult task and challenge of creating a story from a bunch of loose images, it was also hidden and layered with assignments and goals of storytelling. So in every exercise, there was a hidden agenda buried in the storytelling technique. It could have been something as simple as reversing your understanding of a character, changing a relationship between two characters, but this was sort of to bring out a different approach to storytelling. And that's what many of the participants came up with. So we're going to take a brief look at some of the submissions that we had from the class. This is Lyone, Salome. This is her work. So we're looking at the PDF assembled version that I stitched together. This is a look of it. This is called the Carnivore. So every part of the comic is the hand touch. The outside border is from my PDF assembly, but this is the comic. And we're talking first about the gutter. We notice we're using a colored frame around it. The entire comic, we did discuss the word balloons and even the choice of color here in the narrative. And some of the tasks were to create a narrative and do not show us stuff, but tell us stuff. And we approached it from a truly person narrating the entire story. The images are placed together so we can tell this is a background that was supplied and they placed a ship on top. So this was not a completely assembled picture. This is them taking pieces and assembling the story that way. The study page level thinking, where instead of just thinking panel to panel, as you can see here, panel to panel, we had a story that was based on an entire page. So this is one of the assignments where they're doing the narrative, which they were tasked with, creating a story from a narrative, and also thinking in page terms. In regular comics, this is called the splash page, but we kind of expanded upon that and made it that you had to tell a lot more of the story. So these are all assembled images that are separate. Let's go back to that folder so you can understand how this was put together. These are the kind of images which are isolated PNGs and done in different styles too. So there's 3 or 4 different styles that they could choose to work from and mix and match or apply their own effects. So as you can see with some of the images, they place these together to tell the story, the framing. Of course, we've broken how you can zoom into certain images and you don't have to keep the same aspect ratio of the original render. And now we're back at the beginning of a story and a progression, so you can see how we're slowly moving us through the story. Done for dramatic effect. This device, you'll see in some of the other homework examples, could have been almost anything. Some have been using it for a communicator, some use it as a weapon, and in this case, it's being used as a pregnancy test. And we're getting already into the emotions because we're talking about what relationship do they have that one character can't tell the other. I'm not going to read the entire comic book, but we're just going to study some of the stylistic choices that were used here. And again, to fill in the background with a texture, as opposed to either leaving it the stark white or using black, as you've seen me talk about before. This picture is, all these images were almost the same size, so we have some cropping to create a unique perspective. Also, zooming in increases it to a portrait. Stacking, as we discussed before, stacking. Word balloons breaking out of the frame and sitting on top of every panel. Menacing, which is also solving some of the other relationship tasks that the participants had. Shocker. This is interesting work. And again, these were the confines of a story where the images weren't in any specific order. So you've got to sort of look over the entire library and figure out, how do I put together a meaningful story out of this? And also they had page number restraints, so they had to actually accelerate the story, and it wouldn't be just a fun game of placing panels and seeing what you get. And here comes one of the big twists. Big twist here. Inquire about the father. He might not even be a human. And then we have the baby. So this leads us, and again, this is somewhat more of a mobile. This is obviously me stitching the book together myself, but even so, loose thoughts on the panel brings you into the storminess of someone's mind. The character breaking into the fog 10 years earlier. Completely different. And this is a very interesting splice job, because these were different weeks that they've used together to assemble one cohesive story. Took quite a bit of work. This was an entire battle scene, and we've actually been able to place the two together. So this is really creative to pull these two separate, completely separate motifs and get it together. Characters on a battlefield. They were given also soldiers in combat. They created their own backgrounds to formulate these scenes. Again, excellent panel work where they're cutting panels up. My son, please forgive me. Wow. And then now we go back even further, 2 months before that. They were given a scene of characters at a lake having a conversation. And again, all of this is when you're just going to take the images, place them in your own context. They can mean whatever you choose your story. Very nice. And the punchline at the end as he calls to the mother. So not easy to pull off. We jump now into a present time, which is a much more futuristic sort of setting and universe. The two characters are assembled. I've just had some flashback. I'm fine. This now lets you know that this was the character thinking back to that. Again, I don't want to get too far into the story. We're just looking more so at the stylistic choices and how this artist approached solving these very difficult problems of how to put together a story with all these pieces and parts and give you something. This is clever, splitting a panel up. It actually, what's interesting about the choice made here is that this artist has chosen to override the actual panels they've been given for art and chose to think about their layout and their choice. So this singular image has been split mentally into two different panels. Oh, there's our device again. And again, it's still related to its previous purpose. Oh, we have action. Unknown character. I'm here for her. The stakes have just been raised up. We don't know, sir. You are here. Ominous ending. And this begs me to say, okay, I want to see more. Which also was one of the other goals, is to create a narrative worthy of the reader wanting to get more. Even if it's simple as another page or another chapter, but we kind of do want to make something that elicits enough interest that you're curious of what happens earlier. You saw earlier in this actual book, there were a few cross points where you could have said, okay, that could have been a cliffhanger for an episode to end or a chapter to end. So we're sort of getting that. So this was one of the submissions we had for the class. This was called Carnivore. I thank you, and I will see you on the next one.